Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM. This morning we are discussing how is our Ramadan affected if we can't fast, a situation I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Just a reminder that this is a live discussion, so please share your experiences by calling the number on your screens, or you can tweet us at Islam Channel, #WAM15. So, Sister Naveed, I'm going to come back to you now. We spoke a little bit before the break about some of the reasons why we might not be able to fast, during the month of Ramadan. But, there are so many other ways, as we kind of touched upon, there are so many other ways that we can get involved and that we can really feel the benefit of this month. Yeah. So what kind of tips have you got to offer?
Some of the things that come to my mind at the top of my head are things like maybe getting involved in the itikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan, making dua throughout the whole month of Ramadan, offering food, like the sisters were saying, to the neighbours, or having people over for iftar, and really having that atmosphere and that feeling of Ramadan going on inside you, reading the Quran, doing the dhikr of Quran. And if you can't read the Quran because it might be a time where you cannot actually be reading and touching the Quran, just listen to the words of the Quran, read books, make it a time when you want to really delve into the knowledge of Islam. Go to talks, go to circles, go to the tafsir classes that might be happening in and around your area. So, and actually think about yourself, because the whole point of Ramadan is to better yourself this Ramadan for the coming and the rest of your life. So look at what you have done in the last year and whether you have made the improvements and the changes that you needed to, and look to how you can become a better Muslimah and the areas that you can better, maybe as a wife, a mother, a daughter, just a Muslim in the community, etc. So there's so much more that you can be doing. I think you're
right. It's a really reflective time, isn't it? And I think, my kind of big advice would be, actually, we're only in the first week. There's still time. If you feel you haven't sort of made the most of the days so far, for whatever reason, use this time now in the best way you can. Think about the days that you've got left. Think about what your schedule is and plan for it. We say plan before Ramadan, but if you haven't for whatever reason, then, it's never too late. Still use the remaining days that we've got in the best way that you possibly can.
And there's so many Hadees that talk about, that motivate us. There's a Hadees in which it was narrated by Zayd bin Khalid that Muhammad ﷺ said, who provides a fasting person something with which to break his fast, he will earn the same reward as the one who was observing the fast, without diminishing in any way the reward of the latter. And there's a Tirmidhi Hadees, and to think that you can actually gain the reward of the fasting person without actually having been fasting yourself is amazing.
The mercy of Allah subhanallah, it's absolutely amazing. Sister Nazi, I wanted to pick up on a point that you made before the break when you were talking about the postnatal bleeding, because I think for some women, I know I experienced this. I have my daughter like the 4th day into Ramadan, and then I felt like my whole kind of Ramadan was obliterated, because not only can you not fast, but you can't pray, you can't kind of read Quran, from a sort of, you can't hold the kind of Arabic text. So, I really felt kind of disjointed and left out of the whole thing, and I look back at that year and I felt like I didn't even have a Ramadan. So, subhanAllah, what can we do in those situations?
I think the best thing to is remind yourself is that, look, Islam is a way of life. We say this, isn't it? And there are so many things that we do on a day-to-day basis that if we aligned our intentions to those activities, they would become an act of ibadat. So we know this from Islam, your actions are by your intentions. So let me give you an example. On a day-to-day basis, for a woman, someone who is like breastfeeding her child, what is said of her is a breastfeeding woman gets one reward for each drop of milk that is fed to the child. Now imagine another hadith which then says, in the context of Ramadan, that not Ramadan, but just generally, it's just the Prophet ﷺ said, is any one of you capable of earning 1,000 hasana rewards a day? Someone from the gathering asked, how many can earn of us, how can any one of us earn 1,000 hasana? The Prophet ﷺ said, glorify Allah 100 times by just saying subhanallah, and a good deeds will be written for you, 1,000 sins will be wiped away from you. So do the alternatives, do dhikr. There are all these other actions that are open to you by which you can gain the reward. Even that act of breastfeeding, know that when you are doing something, an action like that in Ramadan, even that action gets multiplied. And this is something that, we forget. There are so many things that we're doing within our day-to-day lives. They would be magnified and become acts of ibadah if we were conscious of them as acts of worship. Dhikr is one of the most obvious ones that again, it's so underplayed, yet it has such a huge weight weighing on the scales at the end of the day. We have this whole issue of that, you know, what's the use of reciting and racing to read the Quran in the whole month, but yet not really understand the contents of what the message of the Quran is. So use this moment of reflection to actually think about, pick up the translation of the Quran and read that and understand what is it, how can you change your life. It's about, this month is about self-reflection. It's about really trying to make changes within your lives. So read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, read tafsirs and understand there's so much that you can do, and these are all acts of ibadah. It's not the kind of way that we've kind of regimentalized that it's about tarawih, it's about the prayer, the fasting. It's actually more than that. And I think even for the person who's fasting, they shouldn't just be caught up in those kind of ritualistic, but they should actually branch out and look into, but understand what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to reflect and contemplate on, because there is a lot this month that you can do. Absolutely. And it shouldn't become like a tick box mentality, but there should be fruitfulness from this month. And unless you do that and really open your eyes to what it is that you're doing in a day-to-day life, how can you move forward with that, especially for the remainder of the year? Because again, it's not about this month, just this month, it's about what you take from this month.
I think it's like thinking of it as, I mean, this is how I always view it, and that is that the exemption of fasting is like a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's like as if somebody comes and brings you a gift, brings it to your house, but then you're like, no, I really don't want it, please take it back. And how offended the other person would be that I offered you this gift with all my heart and all my love, and you've just refused it and returned it. And we would never do that. Even if we didn't like the gift, we'd keep it and be so grateful and pretend we loved it. And it's the same way with the exemption of fasting. It's something that, it's a mindset we have to actually first accept the fact that this Ramadan I'm not going to be fasting for X, Y and Z reasons, or for the rest of my life now most likely I won't be fasting for X, Y and Z reasons, and then accepting that gift and then channeling it in a way where you can make your Ramadan successful in different ways.
I think that's true, isn't it? And obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands all of our realities, so it's not like we're competing against one another. It's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just looking at, you know, what we can achieve in our own situation.
And He's not going to burden us with anything more than we can't deal with. So this is the thing, we shouldn't look at things in a negative way. You've just had a baby, you've just had, you know, subhanallah, that is such a miracle in itself.
I think that's absolutely true. You know. Sister Nusrat, what was your final quick take-home message?
I was just going to say that in order to actually ensure that your productivity during Ramadan, despite the fact that you can't fast, is there, you have to be honest with yourself. Even though you're not fasting, are you using the fact that you're not fasting as a precursor not to try and better yourself? Because it is a month where we can better ourselves. But I think the steps which we can take is, one, if you're a person particularly that may be used to listening to music, or change some of your background noises and distractions to things that actually draw you closer to Allah. So for me, I quite like listening to things like poems, qasida, burda, and even try and contemplating not only the Quran but even Islamic statements. So I read, for example, the Contentions by Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, and it could be even one sentence, but it gets you thinking about the world around you. So even when we're doing dhikr, don't try and do like a tick box as to I have to do this amount of la ilaha illallah, I have to do this amount of whatever it is. Try and actually contemplate the meaning of that and try and see if you can implement that. I think
that's true. It's got to be really connecting, isn't it? There's no point in just saying it if there's no connection, there's no feeling.
And never assume the worst of Allah, even if you can't fast. The Prophet ﷺ actually even said that I am as my servant thinks I am. This is regarding Allah. Allah said, I am as my servant thinks I am. I'm with him when he makes mention of me. If he makes mention of me to himself, I make mention of him to myself. And if he makes mention of me in an assembly, I make mention of him in an assembly better than it. And if he draws near to me in arm's length, I draw near to him in phantom's length. And if he comes walking, I go at speed. And that's related in Al-Bukhari.
MashaAllah, what beautiful hadith.
Each step you take, just continue doing it.
Absolutely, and what a lovely hadith to end on there. So thank you for sharing that with us, one of my favourites. For those of us not fasting, we shouldn't be a time when we feel isolated or jaded from the spirit of it all. There's always something you can do to strengthen your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a multitude of ways. Whether it's preparing an iftar or increasing your remembrance of Allah in the early hours of the morning, there's always more we can do to gain closeness to our Creator and to get the full purification that Ramadan has to offer. Some really great reminders, and I hope some tips to benefit us over the remaining days of this blessed month, inshallah. But if you missed any of today's show, all is not lost, as you can catch the highlights from this week on Sunday at 3 p.m. We're off to another break now, but just before we go, here is today's ayah from Surah Mulk.